Why did Silicon Valley Bank collapse and what are possible consequences? SVB was considered a lucrative financier for startups and tech companies in California. It made a name for itself in the industry primarily by issuing low-cost loans even to previously unprofitable companies. In recent years, the bank has mainly benefited from the boom in the tech industry. Startups often deposited the cheap money that investors invested in technology companies during the coronavirus pandemic into accounts with the SVB. By the end of 2022, the bank managed approximately $172 billion and reported huge annual profits. As a result, the company's valuation soared. Its market capitalization, which was just over $10 billion before the pandemic, reached as high as $44 billion in November 2021, and it still stood at around $17 billion a week ago. SVB invested incoming funds into various securities, such as U.S. government bonds and mortgage-backed securities, which promised interest rates of 1.5% when central bank rates were at zero. However, the interest rate turnaround of the Fed hit the bank twice. Firstly, less money was being invested in startups. This caused a significant decrease in incoming funds while outflowing funds for the startups increased. Secondly, the bonds on the bank's books lost value drastically as central bank interest rates rose. Moody's, an agency rating the Silicon Valley Bank, lowered the bank's credit rating, which worried investors and triggered a bank run. CEO of SVB Gregory Becker sought advice from Goldman Sachs, flew to New York, and negotiated with Moody's and other rating firms. Over the weekend, they created a contingency plan to sell bonds from the bank's holdings and fill the gap via newly issued shares. The first step of the plan was successful, with Becker's team selling about $21 billion worth of low-yielding bonds, mostly U.S. Treasuries, at a loss of $1.8 billion. In the second step, investors were to subscribe to new shares worth $2.25 billion. However, the announcement triggered a bank run, and well-known venture capital firms withdrew their funds, causing the share price of SVB to plummet by 60% on Thursday, 9th of March. Until the U.S. authority FDIC took control, declaring the bank bankrupt. U.S. authorities announced that all SVB depositors would be fully protected, and they could access their money starting from the upcoming Monday. Taxpayers would not have to bear any losses related to the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank. Now that we know what happened, it's time to look at possible consequences of the collapse. Although America's President Joe Biden declared in a televised speech that Americans can rely on the banking system being safe and that the costs would not have to be borne by taxpayers but by a safety net fund fed by the banks, the uncertainty of investors on the stock markets continues. It could happen that rising interest rates and yields cause more banks to throw in the towel. Possible domino effects such as bank runs, where so many customers want to keep their savings safe that the banks cannot settle all claims at the same time, have been averted for the time being, but a residual risk remains. As a result, the share prices of other banks fell sharply, showing how worried investors currently are. At present, the situation is difficult to assess, but a collapse of the banking system as in 2008 seems unlikely, as banks are now required to have higher deposit cushions. If the discussed domino effects can be averted, it seems likely that no long-term consequences will arise from the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and that the shock on the financial markets will soon no longer play a major role. If you want to know what benefits you might get by stopping to drink alcohol, just click the video in the top right. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like and subscribe.